welcome back, guys. Here we are again. So here's how far I got. So far so good. Battery's back in. When I put the battery back in, I made sure I pushed it all the way towards the firewall as much as I could to give me as much clearance for these studs that I have here. Studs look good. The way I have it routed is I have the wiring loom coming this way, as you can see here, zip tied. It kind of follows the same path my wiring took for the gauges. You are going to have to take apart or take the battery out to get it under here. This hinge does touch the battery here, so you're not gonna be able to sneak this loom past that without taking the battery out. So anyway, tucked it under, have the loom going this way next to the fuse box, and then the small part of the, or the short part of this wiring harness, I have it kind of looping back this way, and I have the two positives on the battery here and then the negative here. Just be careful when you guys are tightening these down. Make sure that they're actually touching all the way. Let's see if I can get here. You're going to be looking for spaces between all these fittings. Make sure that they're completely closed. There's no gaps. Same thing here. You don't want any gaps. You can check by taking the wire and trying to move it up and down. If it moves, it's not tight enough. Alternatively, you also don't want to strip the bolt or pull the stud out of the battery, so be careful that you don't overdo it. So anyway, home stretch here. Let me show you guys what I'm thinking. So here's the Hobbs switch, and basically what has to happen is you have to have a boost reference going to the Hobbs switch here, and then the loom goes, the pigtail should I say, this guy plugs in here, and then it also plugs into this guy here. All right, so basically this wiring has two sets of wiring. The power gets turned on to the second pump as soon as this Hobbs switch sees 4 psi. So here's what I'm thinking. I went to AutoZone, bought some 5/16 just fuel line hose. I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna take this end cap off, and I'm gonna route this hose, a hose, from here onto here. I'm actually going to put it on to the Hobbs switch, and I'm going to clamp it down here. Shouldn't go anywhere as we have some threads to bite into. I'd actually like to see a threaded barb fitting on here, which I'm probably going to do that down the road right now. Don't really feel like running to the store and getting it. Should be good enough just for reference. When you look, try to do this with one hand. It's not working. Can you see that? Okay. So it's probably, the threaded portion probably measures, I don't know, I'd say 8.5 mil, and then the interior, the inside here, probably 7.8 to 8 millimeters. So it doesn't go on there very easily, so I don't expect it to come off. Anyway, I'm going to clamp it down as well and just periodically check it. And welcome back to the video. Here's how far along we are. We have the harness completely hooked up. One thing you're going to note is there are two pigtails here that are empty. You're going to get these little plugs that have a wire that just connects one to the other. You're going to have to plug one in. That's going to be the fuel pump that runs constantly. So if you want to run both fuel pumps, which I don't recommend all the time, you're going to plug both of these in. because I'm running one constantly and one based on the Hobbs switch, I have one plugged in with this little pigtail and another one going to my Hobbs switch. So here's how we're going to do this test. I already tested the fuel pump that I have hooked up by doing a little jumper from 30 to 87 or whatever, yeah, from 30 to 87 terminals, as I showed you earlier. The second test is I plugged in the wiring harness to the Hobbs switch. We're going to run a line to one of these things, and then this is going to be hooked up to a compressor. So what's going to happen is I'm going to run the compressor, apply no less than 4 pounds of pressure, and then I'm going to run this line off the fuel rail into here. I'm going to run it with one fuel pump, and then I'm going to apply pressure, and we should see the fuel flow increase as the Hobbs switch turns on. Just want to show you guys something very interesting. So I hooked up the hose to the Hobbs switch with a little bit of reluctancy, simply because, you know, this is threaded, and arguably you should have a threaded fitting on here, and with an official you know, pressure tube going to the manifold or the throttle body. But as I was taking this off, this hose was fairly difficult to take off. You couldn't just pull it off. I actually have to unthread it. But if you look inside, this is what it looked like in there. I mean, it's got perfect threads on the inside without any tears. So if I can get it to focus, maybe. All right, hopefully you guys can see that. My point being, this is proven to work and not pop off of this fitting, because I couldn't physically take it apart. I actually had to unscrew the hose off of this fitting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut the used part off. So like maybe like the first, I don't know, ½ inch. And then I'm going to do the same concept where I thread this guy into that, put a clamp on there, and should be good to go. It'll hold on for a while. All right, so here it is, the completed product. Here's what I finally decided on, and I'll kind of give you my thought process on this. You can choose to do it in a different way. This is just how I figured it would look the cleanest and the most safest. So to get a pressure reading to my Hobbs switch, I went off of the throttle body fitting here. The hose that I used to put on there is fairly tight. However, I went ahead and put one of these clamps on there just in case. This really isn't a line you want to pop off, especially when you're under boost. So I have this line running, and it's a fairly short run. I thought about running the line all the way back through here and having the Hobbs switch in here. The problem with that is you don't want this to kink, obviously, because that's your boost reference for the Hobbs switch. However, the wiring here can afford to, you know, make 90-degree bends and so on and so forth to get it to tuck in nicely over here. So what I decided on is a short run from the fitting of the throttle body to right here, which the switch kind of just sits here. It's not going anywhere. It's sitting on top of, you know, right there, right where the fuel injector is, between the crossover for the fuel rail and the hold down bracket here. So it just kind of sits there. I don't know. I may secure it down, I may not. It's not really going to go anywhere. But the thought process behind this is least amount of bends for the boost reference. And whenever, you know, you're doing a pre-inspection of, you know, under the hood before you go out and possibly or non-possibly do some street racing, it's a very, very easy visual inspection to see. You can check your belt, make sure everything looks good here. You know, you'll have all your lines running, and then of course you can see everything for the Hobbs switch with very little problems or issues trying to get to the fittings and the clamps. So that's my thought process. And all I did here was I just ran this wire back here. This cover here does not actually touch the firewall. There's about a 1/2 inch gap. You're gonna have to bend it out a little bit just to get the fitting through. This fitting is fairly wide. So once you get that through here, I just went next to the battery, and then I have the loom here, and looks pretty clean. See a wire here, looms there. You know, this kind of looks a little out of place when you look under the hood, but you know, so does that and all the other things down there anyway. So again, this isn't a show car. The car is meant for power and speed, not necessarily to win beauty contests. So I'm sure you can spend some time making this look a little bit prettier. This is just what I decided on. Coming around here, well, I ran the wire for the harness, as I mentioned to you guys, behind this latch opening cable you'll have. It's pretty sturdy. You can zip tie onto it and tuck behind. And I went down through here, shot straight down, and then the wires come through here and then go back through that little channel that we've fished the wiring through. So that's what it looks like now. And then coming back towards the back half of the car, here's what I decided on. Once I plugged in the fuel pump, I ran the wiring up away from the wheel. I do run some wider tires in the back, so I wanted it to sit away from the wheel as much as possible. I have this large connector and the factory connector, as you can see it here, kind of tucked, so it sits there nicely. And then just ran this up here, zip tied it to this fitting. Keep in mind that when you put your wheel well liner in here, there's a screw that goes through here. So just make sure that if the screw does go straight through, it does not hit your loom, which I kind of position it so it doesn't, just for extra precaution. And then I ran it up here, kind of zip tied onto this little sensor that's got a bracket up here it's being held onto. So I zip tied it to the metal bracket, not to the sensor itself, so obviously it doesn't tear it out. And then ran down here, I got these 2 relays that are zip tied onto the inside here to this little clamp that holds the, I believe that's the quarter panel here, rear quarter panel on. So the relays sit there, and then of course there is my ground, and then the rest of the wiring just feeds back through all the way over there. You know, it'll position itself over time. The main thing here is you want to keep all the wiring away from the wheel well. If you're going to be running larger tires, if you're going to be lowering your car, obviously you don't want that to rub through. When I look at my wheel well liner, it looks like my tire does rub a little bit. It hasn't rubbed all the way through, but just a little bit. I'm assuming that's when, you know, the car squats during acceleration. That's kind of where it makes sense that it's rubbing. So I took that into consideration when I position all this wiring, so there's nothing here in case that does happen. So anyway, that'll conclude this. Just got to put the liners back on, drop the car. Got the car put together. I have not started it yet. It's the first startup. I expect it to bog a little bit, maybe have a little bit of difficulty starting, simply because I did have the injectors disconnected. So I assume it's going to take a little bit to start, but hopefully not too long. Let's hear it. healthy. We look inside. Air fuel looks good. We got good vacuum, or decent vacuum. Time to go for a test drive. Alright guys, so here we are. I'm going to take the Corvette for the first test drive post all work. We have a catch can. We have a giant rub coming out of that driveway. We have the LS6 intake that I put on, and then of course we have the dual fuel pump setup. So it's a little bit nerve-wracking simply because what I haven't told you guys is I actually had this car bog down and stall out on me a couple of weeks ago, which is kind of why I'm actually doing the double pumper setup earlier than expected. Well, it all kind of lined up because I had to do the dyno session anyway to take off the 5500 rev limiter and get it tuned past that, bump the red line up to like 6500. So what's nerve-wracking is obviously if this thing just decides to stop, bog down and not work, obviously it's a problem because you can't just call any tow truck to tow this thing away. And there's really no reason why it didn't. I couldn't figure out. It's almost like it lost fuel. It definitely, it would turn over. I'm pretty sure I had spark, but when I'm running the car, I can typically smell a little bit of E85 coming through. I wasn't able to get that when I was broken down, which is why I thought it was fuel. So then, you know, I thought about, okay, well maybe, you know, there's a line clog that didn't do the fuel filter. You know, maybe I was stressing the fuel pump too much because I was doing a few pulls there at the time, and maybe it just, you know, it was intermittently going in and out. Anyway, couldn't really figure out why. So when the tow truck came the next day, what ended up happening was I actually, the guy asked, hey, you want to try starting it, see if we can get up on the flatbed? I was like, yeah, sure. I tried the day before. It would just turn over and it wouldn't start. So hit the button. After a few seconds, fired right up. So, yeah, a little problematic because it came and went. I didn't have any check engine lights, didn't have anything out of the ordinary. So anyway, so it's a little nerve-wracking now, but hopefully we can figure out what the issue is, or hopefully it's the fuel pump fuel system. I don't know, I guess we'll see. Anyway, warming up the car right now, taking it for a drive around the block. I do have low fuel, obviously, because the fuel level sensor is not back in the gas tank. So when I go get it tuned, I will have to get that taken, that code erased, and then the check gauges turned off from my dashboard, simply because I don't really like that. But overall, car drives pretty good. Doesn't seem like there's any issues with it. It's staying right around 14.7, 15.0 for the air fuel ratio. Boost, we don't know yet. Haven't gotten it any, but I would assume if I was having issues with a leaking manifold or something along those lines, that I wouldn't be seeing this kind of vacuum, which is not the case. So we're gonna almost there as far as the warm-up goes. The other thing too is, now that I don't have the gas gauge, I kind of have to go off of mileage. So I know I put in 5 gallons of E85. A full tank is good to about 180 miles, and I think a full tank is, I don't know, 16 gallons maybe. I don't know. I think when I did the math, I was getting like 11 or 13 miles a gallon with this thing, with the 85. So yeah, it's not a Prius. It self-identifies as a Prius, but it's not a Prius. So don't think that you can just drive this thing around and get, you know, 29 miles a gallon. I mean, it's not, definitely not the case here. So, but we'll see here. The other interesting thing too is, as I drive, I've noticed with the other fuel pump, the other 340 that I had in, the wideband would be all over the place. Now when I'm driving, it's kind of just staying around 14.7, 15.0, 14.7, 15.0. It jumps a little bit, but nothing crazy. So, if you guys haven't noticed, it's very difficult for me to do 2 things at once. When I come to a stop sign, I can either engage the clutch and put it in gear and take off, or talk. I can't do both, guys, so I apologize if that's your expectation from this channel. It's not going to happen. So overall, nothing out of the ordinary here. I don't know, I feel pretty confident I can take this thing over to the gas station. So here's the other problem. So I live in New Mexico. The streets here, when you get onto a main road, it's like 5-6 lanes wide, and there really isn't anywhere to go. You're stuck between a curb and then a concrete barrier, so you can't just pull off to the side on somebody's lawn. And quite frankly, this really isn't a place that you want to be stuck or stopped on one of the lanes, because people aren't very nice about their driving habits here. So doing it quick. Cool. All right, so that was a quick first gear, second gear kind of ordeal. I don't think I got any boost there, but the fuel ratios are staying right around 13.2, 13.4. I do hear like a fluttering. Don't really know what that is. The important part is I do have my fire extinguisher here, so if anything goes downhill, you guys know the drill. Not letting this thing burn down. So maybe we can do a quick pull here. Go ahead and downshift in a second. Air fuel dropped down to 10.5, 10.8, which is right around where the tuner had it set. So fuel pump's definitely doing its job. I'll probably talk a little bit more about it in the video previously, but when I was testing the Hobbs switch, as expected, there is a little bit of delay. When that thing sees pressure, there's a little bit of delay for the fuel pressure to increase in the fuel rails. I'd say half a second, maybe, based on what my wife was telling me when she was holding the hose and kind of doing a visual of, you know, the volume of the fuel coming out. But that's the important part here, guys. If you have fuel cut, let's say at 8 psi, 9 psi, or not fuel cut, but you're running out of fuel at like 8 or 9 psi, go with the 4 psi Hobbs switch. If you have it at 4 psi, then you may want to start out with, you know, a larger fuel pump, because you can't really afford to have your secondary turn on at that point in time. You may not make it. The margin of error there is very, very slim. I wouldn't personally take that risk, but that's my thoughts on that. Looking at the dyno graph, I think mine was roughly like 7 or 8 psi that I started to kind of lean out. So with that said, you figure at 4 psi, by the time I get to 7, 8, you know, I should be good. So I don't know. We'll figure it out as soon as I get this thing on the dyno. The other thing that I'm a little bit upset about is the little scoop that comes with the supercharger kit that's sitting in the front of the car that helps scoop air. If you supercharge your car, what ends up happening is our cars are bottom breathers. So basically they have a scoop that faces the ground, and air enters the engine bay through that scoop, and it kind of floods the radiator. Well, what the supercharger kit does, it basically puts 2 of those, one of those for the front mount, one of those for, you know, your radiator. And what I noticed with mine is mine was cracked, so that doesn't help very much. So I'm a little bit upset about that. Hopefully that doesn't become a giant problem. So I don't know. Maybe it's because I haven't been in this car in 2-3 weeks, but this thing's running pretty solid, guys. Oil pressure, everything is good. The other thing, you know, as I think about the issue that I was just telling you guys about with the car breaking down, when I was taking off the fuel filter, well, when I was putting out my exhaust, my axle back, I looked at the fuel filter and it was pretty shiny. So I was like, oh, okay, well, you know, shiny means new means, you know, recently replaced, because quite frankly, the car was taken care of. I don't know who had it before me, but it was definitely taken care of. So at that point in time, I did not replace the fuel filter. But then when I went and bought a new one, now that I've, you know, drained the fuel lines and I was doing the fuel pump, and I went to replace it, they're both shiny, obviously, but the other one looked like it had some OEM numbers on it. It definitely looked different than you know, the AC Delco that I put on here, or whatever it is from AutoZone. So when I get home, I'm actually going to look up those numbers to see if that actually correlates back to an OEM part, and if it does, you know, the car's got 93,000 miles on it. I recently started running E85 through it. Maybe that's, you know, maybe that's the problem. Maybe it's not. I don't know. It's just, it's kind of annoying when your car breaks down and you don't know why it happened. And as I'm talking about this right now is right around the spot where the car actually started bogging down when it did break down. So, you know, not nervous at all, but I do have an exit strategy. If this thing does bog down, just close your eyes, cut it right, and hope for the best. No, I'm just kidding. No, I would definitely pull off on a side street again. I'm staying in the curb lane this time. Last time I was in the middle lane, actually going to the gym, and you know, I was 2 scoops of pre-workout in, and you know, the car dies, so I'm sitting in a side street, you know, amped up, just waiting to tear up some weights, and not a weight to be seen. Well, there was a dead weight. My car was there, but other than that, that was it. The other thing to also note with that I've noticed with E85, or that you guys should know with the E85, is when you do talk to your tuner, it fluctuates. So you have a summer blend, winter blend. Make sure that your tuner's you know, understanding of that, because there's different percentages of E85. Keep that in mind if you're trying to decide whether to use, you know, pump gas or E85. Which is kind of funny when people say, you know, oh, I run pump gas. Well, you know, theoretically, E85, you know, you get at a pump. So is E85 pump gas? I don't know. I tell people it is. Yep, my Corvette runs pump gas. Dang it. There's a guy with a BMW there. He gets a pass. I like BMWs. So we are here. Alright, guys. Time to go to get some pump gas here.